dressed for the occasion.
Yes,
And I have lost my drink.
As Madonna said, hello, my name is Randy Osborn. I'm a decorated Eagle Scout. Oh, I'm sorry, that's the wrong story. Hi, my name is Randy Osborn. I'm an alcoholic and a drug addict. I'm also an Eagle Scout. With what scouting stood for in the late 1960s and in the 70s, obedient, honest, trustworthy, loyal, brave, clean, and reverent, to stand on your own 2 feet and to be self-reliant. These two facts about me are total polar opposites. I've been sober and straight now for a little over 13 years. This is the first time I've ever publicly admitted my addiction. My wife lived it with me. My boys have heard the stories, but probably never really thought about it. I grew up in Derby, Kansas, in a loving Christian home. We went to church every Sunday, VBS every summer, Wednesday night Bible school, Bible studies, the whole 9 yards. I went through the motions as a teenager of accepting Christ into my life because all my friends were doing it at the time. As a child, everything I needed was provided, but not everything I wanted, but I was taught the difference. I was shown by example, respect, love, compassion, and that my shoulders had to be big enough for the consequences of my actions and decisions. Life was simple. It was black and white, right or wrong, fact or fiction. There were no shades of gray, and political correctness was not a catchphrase. I had what you could call the perfect Mayberry storybook childhood. I graduated from Derby High in 1978, went to WSU for a couple of semesters, and decided college wasn't for me. I then enrolled in trade school to become an electrician, which I graduated from at the top of my class in September of 1979. The following night, I was in a horrific car accident and spent the next 3.5 months of my life in St. Francis Hospital and in the St. Francis Pavilion Rehab Center. The driver was treated and released that night for a bump on his head. I suffered upper shell brain damage, was semi-comatose for 3 days, and didn't open my eyes for the first 2 weeks. Memory-wise, I basically lost everything before that night. I totally lost 2 weeks of my life and almost all of my childhood memories. The doctors were preparing my parents for the worst in regard to my recovery, telling them that he might be blind, he might be deaf, he might never walk or talk again. I walked out of the rehab center the week before Christmas in 1979, even though it was against policy because I couldn't. It was a big deal. I can remember a lot of smiles, hugs and tears on that day. I was their miracle patient because basically at that time all their patients were transferred to some kind of release assisted living. I feel that after something like this happened in most people's lives, especially with the upbringing I had, they would have counted their blessings, but not me. I went on a rampage for the next 20-some odd years of my life. I started drinking and doing drugs. My new theme in life was, as they say, wine, women, and song. Looking back now, I think that I thought I was invincible. Nothing could touch me and nothing could control me. I got a job for a company out of Wichita, Kansas, doing heavy industrial electrical work all over the United States, and even spent 3 months in Jamaica. I worked hard, 10 to 12 hours a day, at least 6 days a week, and most of the time all 7. I lived out of my suitcase in low-rate motels, usually located in the worst part of whatever town I was in. I also played hard. I was taught that if you couldn't hang with the big dogs, stay on the porch. Most nights I led the pack. I usually passed out for approximately 3 or 4 hours a night, which at the time I called sleep. I had a 4-finger bag of weed, 100 lot of black beauties, had it a week for years. I was exposed to a bunch of other drugs, but for some reason I never did them. A light night was at least a 12-pack, 4 blacks and a couple doobies, and Jose Cuervo, another friend of mine. I never hurt the next day, so it was easy. Looking back, I think I was pickled and never came down, and I was invincible. I went over to Handlebars on a motorcycle at 50 miles an hour on the southbound 135 to East Kellogg exit bridge during rush hour, and walked away with a little road rash and concussion. I had a ladder go out from under me at work one day, fell a little over 20 feet with my tool bags on, and walked away with that with 6 stitches in my buttocks. I passed out one early morning on the way home from a party, jumped the company truck approximately 20 feet using the driveway culvert as my ramp. Either on takeoff or landing, the passenger side front tire came clear through the floor of the vehicle. I walked away from that with a mild cut on my forehead. I was invincible. These are only a few of the instances that I walked away from that could have and probably should have had much more severe consequences. My mother would tell you that if a cat has 9 lives, I've used at least 11. Money was not an object. I was making more than my father by the age of 22 and almost six figures by 30, as I basically worked 365 days a year and was very good at what I did. I got married in 1983 and divorced in 1985. Was home maybe 100 days out of that 2-year period. I traveled 30 to 40 days at a time and would come home for 3 or 4, use her up and hit the road again. I had at least one woman in each town for comfort, as women were nothing but a piece of anatomy to me. I used them up, discarded them, and moved on. I was what we in the field refer to as an official road warrior. I was hardcore and worse than any mother's imagination of the man they warned their daughters about. In 1990, I quit my job for the company in Wichita, and at that time I was doing a job in Lake City, Minnesota. I got a job at a local manufacturing plant as a maintenance electrician. I thought I had fallen in love. It turned out to just be love. Anyway, I met Melinda Pickett in late 1990 in a hallway to work. As we passed, she said, "Hi, Randy." I remember being tongue-tied, turning around and watching her walk away as I had never met her that I remembered. She had on a peach and yellow colored dress, and her hair went to her waist at that time. And I'll tell you, those hips sure moved nicely. The very next day I saw her in the maintenance office. I went in and introduced myself with all my southern charm. I found out that she was a very naive 17, working through some kind of high school classwork program. I was 30 at the time. We got married on Flag Day 1991. We were the talk of the town of 4,500, as the only reason we were getting married was because she was pregnant. We didn't have our first son for over a year. Man, that was a long pregnancy. Not very long after being married, I went back to work for the company out of Wichita, Kansas. Went back on the road, stepped right back into my road whore lifestyle. Would come home after 30 or 40 days, use her up, leave her to deal with life and expected her to. I put her in a position to man the house, as all I did was provide the money to pay the bills. Without even realizing it, I taught her to fear me, that I couldn't be trusted, and to not count on me for anything. She had to make all the decisions and pretty much knew better than to bother me with them. We all know this isn't God's design. But hey, I was invincible. We had our first son in 1992 and our second in 1994. We bought a fifth wheel and the family started traveling with me. The 4 of us lived in this 38-foot camper for 7 years all over the United States. Somewhere along in here, she approached me and we stood face to face. And I believe she was even poking me in the chest. And she said, "It's either drugs and alcohol or me." So I quit. In 1998, I was working a job in Manitowoc, Wisconsin, and Melinda led me down the path holding my hand to Christ. And I accepted him into my heart. Our lives had changed and we had a good church, Christian friends. She was involved in the music ministry, which I'd like to say is one of her passions or gifts. Life was good. Everything was going great. Well, the job ended. Our next stop was Blackfoot, Idaho. We left our boat in Wisconsin, and I made the mad dash over the weekend type trip to get it by myself. I made one of those life-changing decisions on this trip. My thought process was, she isn't with me, she will never know. I hooked up with the foreman from the mechanical contractor as they were still on site for the night. We went to a few of the local drinking establishments in town, and I got so hammered Then when I got back to my hotel, I couldn't get the key card in the slot. I had to go ask one of the gals at the desk. One of the gals at the desk. Just imagine that conversation. Anyway, the phone started ringing a very short time later. As I knew who it was, I didn't answer it. After a few times of trying, she finally talked to the gal at the desk. I knew I couldn't cover the fact that I should have had alcohol poisoning and been dead. But she had a conversation with the gal at the desk, and they filled her in on my condition, on how one of them had to let me in and made sure that I hit the bed when I fell. I wonder where the privacy laws were at now. Our lives changed again, and the spiral was down, down, and down. Things would be going good, or so I thought. I would do something stupid, and down we would go again. This pattern became our life for years. I blamed myself, so as I had been taught, I lived and suffered the consequences of my actions and the decisions I made in life. Melinda has smacked me in the back of the head quite a few times over the years, each time using a bigger board, starving for my love and attention. Just a little over a year ago now, she finally used a big enough board. I went out of town to work a 3-month outage with my present job. When I left, as far as I knew, we were done, and a divorce was imminent. When I left, I packed my Bible, which was a first. Don't ask me why I started what I did, but I started reading the book of Psalms. Instead of working 10 hours a day and playing 10 hours a day, I worked, read, cried, and prayed. During these 3 months, I lost 50 pounds. And except for one trip home, the only time I saw Melinda was if she chose to visit me. The outage finished. I returned home to coexist with her in the same house as we tied up loose ends and parted. Something had changed. I started seeing and feeling things that weren't there just a few months prior. My foot was back in the door. It was God. This group called Moses started, and we decided to give it a try. I rededicated my life to Christ and asked her to marry me again. I'd like to take this moment and Linda Osborn, thank you for giving me 22 years to get it what's due right and never truly totally giving up on me. To sum this all up, faith to me is like a traffic signal at a very busy and complex intersection, which is our lives. Throughout life, we feel those nudges of caution, stop, wait for the signal and then you can turn left. Stop and think about it and then you can turn right. Speed up so you can merge safely, just to name a few. God provided His Son, Jesus, to show us by example. I'm going to call Him the crossing guard because He laid down His life for us and only through Him can we cross into our new life. In a nutshell, the Bible is the driving rule. It tells us the consequences and rewards of our decisions and how we choose to live our lives. Now we can either follow all of this or we can choose to ignore it as we are in control of the vehicle. For years I chose to live by my own understanding and it was like going down a one-way street the wrong direction. And bad things happened, very bad things. But hey, I always walked away because I was miserable. A few weeks ago, Shannon made a statement, and as he said it, he looked right at me, and I'm talking eye contact. You walked away because God has a purpose for you, and you haven't completed it. Until tonight, Shannon knew nothing of my past. Derry made a statement recently also that said that if you're in it, you can handle it. I think that's why, I think that God kept me from getting into stuff that would totally decimated me and ruined my life completely. Both of these statements hit me like a baseball bat. God had me in His arms on that night in September of 1979, and He's carried me for years since. The song Amazing Grace, even as a child growing up, has always been my favorite. As it says, amazing grace, how sweet the sound, that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now I'm found, was blind, but now I see. God's grace is amazing. Belinda put it very nicely when she said, God forgives and forgets no matter what or where you've been in life. All you have to do is ask Him. I feel in God's eyes we are all miracles. We don't have to earn His mercy or grace. All we have to do is ask Him to. The other night, while watching a movie that was based on a T.D. Jakes story, I heard this and it really hit my heart. Sometimes our lives have to be turned upside down to learn how to live them right side up. In my case, I also had to be beat around the head and shoulders while I was upside down. It took years, but I'm finally at the molten metal or positive clay stage of life and ready to become the masterpiece that God wants me to be. And now with God front and center of my life, and me being truly all in, I am invincible. Because with Him as my staff and my shield, whom or what shall I fear?
Amen. Wow.